Welcome to a conversation with Clear Mountain. Today we are really blessed by a visit and a conversation with Terry Real. Terry, thank you so much for joining us.
Oh, it's really a joy. Great to be here with you both.
We're kind of interested how much you can read about our relationship from this hour-long conversation.
You can tell us after we end the recording.
Yeah.
It'll be secret.
Well, your dynamic is clearly screwed up, and here's what we'll do that later.
Okay, you're off
I told you.
a good start. Yeah, core negative image and all. It's your adaptive child, Ajahn. We'll start with an introduction. Terry Real is a family therapist, author, and teacher, particularly known for his work on male psychology and relationships. His work has been featured in numerous academic articles as well as in the New York Times and Psychology Today, and he's appeared in conversation with Oprah, Esther Perel, Gabor Mate, and with our friend Rick Hansen, to name a few. Terry is the founder of the Relational Life Institute and the author of I Don't Want to Talk About It on the topic of male depression. How Can I Get Through to You on the role of patriarchy in relationships, the new rules of marriage, and most recently, Us, getting past you and me and building a more loving relationship. And I first heard Terry on an interview and was just so moved by his compassion, his clarity, and how he talked about how we're often driven by these core wounds and conditioning. And although the articulation was not explicitly Buddhist, I just found such resonance with kind of these Buddhist ways that we speak about being conditioned and it leading to how we move into the world as kind of wounded beings searching for some sense of safety. That the chance to have him on and to ask about his languaging for these things was really precious. So, Terry, to begin with, the first question I wanted to ask is, you've spoken with a lot of compassion and clarity on kind of the legacy of trauma through families and how we carry that on from generation to generation.
But wait, before that, first of all, let me correctly pronounce your names. Covilo?
Yeah, it's good enough. Yeah.
What would be better?
I would say Covilo with the emphasis
Covilo.
on. Yeah. Yes.
Covilo. Okay, and you're going to have to help me.
No. Nisapo, like your knee, and then Sa, Edgar Allan Poe. Nisapo.
Nisapo. Okay. Listen, guys, I need to come out of the closet. You need to know that I've been meditating for 60 years. And I've had a very checkered spiritual career, including 7 years sitting Zen. And of all the traditions, the one that most resonates, and I've been through a ton of them, at this point is Taoism. And I see a lot of Taoism in RLT and a lot of Buddhism in RLT, detachment from outcome, compassionate confrontation. But what you were saying, let me say your name again. Nisaba?
Close. Ni, like your knee, Sa, and then Edgar Allan Poe. So Nisapo.
Nisapo. Okay, got it. Nisapo. So saw like a saw. Okay, yeah, Nisapo. Yeah. Here's Krishnamurti. True liberation is freedom from our own automatic impulses. The great spiritual teacher. True liberation is freedom from our own automatic impulses. Choice. I have a dear friend, and we've taught a lot together, the great spiritual teacher Thomas Ubel. I don't know if you know him, but German who lives in Tel Aviv. Thomas, yes. And we work together and we've taught together. Thomas says to observe is to have choice. And I would say neurobiologically it's because the part of us that can observe, prefrontal cortex, is the same part of us that can have choice. And so let me get right into this idea of the automaticness and how we deal with it. Like many systems, I'm not the only one, transactional analysis, IFS, in RLT, that's what I've created, relational life therapy. There are three parts to the brain, to the psyche, and I inherited this from my mentor, Pia Melody. There's what I call the wise adult, prefrontal cortex, the part of us that can stop and think and observe and choose. That's the part we want to be in and we want to bring to our relationships. What makes life really interesting and dicey is there are less mature parts of our being, neurology, and they're subcortical biologically. They're about survival. Everybody knows them: fight, flight, and now we've added a third one, fawn. Fawn is great. Fawn is like, oh, Mr. Lion, let me lick your paw, don't eat me. And fawn as an adult becomes fix or codependence or enabling, anxious attachment style. Fight, flight, fawn. That's pretty good to keep it to those three. So the survival instinct, not thinking part of us, that actually sits on top of an even younger part of us, which we call the wounded child part of us. This is the part of us that just experienced the trauma, which could be active. It could be violation, beating, yelling, screaming, sex. But it could be passive. It could be negligence. Mommy, I hurt my knee. Well, let me just finish my martini and I'll be right over there. That's also trauma. So it's what you got that you shouldn't have. It's also what you didn't get that you should have. They're both injurious. So the wounded child, and I do imagine if you close your eyes and you get in touch with this part, talk to him. That's like first minutes of life up to about 4 or 5. And you just feel it. You feel the abandonment or the all feeling. But wounded children want to crawl up on your lap and just cry for about 1,000 years. Between this very mature part of us and this very, very young part of us is what I call the adaptive child part of us. This is what we learn to do, fight, flight, or fix. And it's automatic. It's knee-jerk. And virtually everybody I see in my clinical work has lived most of their lives out of their adaptive child, thinking that that's an adult, and it's not. And our culture is an immature, narcissistic, anti-relational culture. For 40 years, I've been talking about patriarchy and individualism. And our culture rewards adaptive children. I deal with very high-powered, successful people. They're doing great out in the world. You wouldn't want to be married to them, and you wouldn't want to be in their skin. Think about somebody like Elon Musk. That's an adaptive child. So the world rewards adaptive children, but you're not happy and you don't love. You don't have a good inner life or family life. So what happens? In our relationships, including brotherhood, we're all in relationships, even monks, it's inevitable that the person next to us will wound us. They'll trigger us. What does that mean? Look, you don't remember trauma, you relive it. This is important to understand. And I'll bet this is in Buddhism somewhere. It's just such a smart, wise thing. The combat bit, walking down Main Street with her family, here's a car backfire, spins around like she's got a gun in her hand. She's not thinking, I'm walking down Main Street remembering combat. Her body's back in, it's instantaneous. I call it whoosh. She's back in combat. That's the way trauma works. You lose the present and you're viscerally back in the past. And the way it works for us humans, unless we get liberated, whatever that means, is something comes that's close enough to what happened to us, the car backfires. I was raised by an angry, violent, critical, controlling father. My wife comes in and she's mad at me for something. I'm not a 75-year-old man talking to my wife. I'm a 4-year-old boy trying to ward off my rageful father. The present's gone. And in my body, I'm in the past. So I've got that wounded 4-year-old who's feeling terrified, ashamed. Like most of us have about 2 seconds worth of tolerance for that. And then an older part of me, but still not prefrontal, not thoughtful, still reactive. An older part of me, okay, vulnerable Terry, I've got this. Don't worry about it. Boom. And I'm a fighter. I come from violence. Belinda's a fighter. She comes to fight me. Fight. What you got? And I'm protected and I'm invulnerable. And I'm also not intimate. So the adaptive child is the part of us that protects us, that we learn, did well then, and we drag it into our current relationships and it makes a mess of things. But it's compulsive and automatic. So even though we see we're not getting what we want, this is where we go to over and over and over again. Of course, our adaptive child evokes first the wound and then the adaptive child and whoever we're dealing with. And then we've got 2 adaptive children. And I like to say, you 2 can go sit down and have a beer. You're not even there anymore. Your adaptive children are like duking it out. So the first skill, the skill, is waking up. The skill, a great neurobiologist, you should have him on the show, Dan Siegel, brilliant pioneer. And Dan talks about this. This is the sort of brainstem, this is the limbic system, this is the prefrontal cortex. And he says, what happens in trauma when you get flooded, prefrontal cortex goes offline, limbic system fires up. And what all therapy, and I'm going to say meditation too, you quiet this and you bring this back online. Stop and think. As Thomas says, in relationships, urgency is our enemy and breath is our friend. Shut up, stop, get centered, stop and think. And you're literally moving, you're quieting a more primitive, if you will, part of your neurology and bringing back on board more mature, adult, present, here and now. And we call this relational mindfulness. Hi, Buddhist. And we say that it is exactly like it's like sitting on a pillow. Mindfulness is mindfulness. It's being aware of where you are and what your thoughts and feelings are, and taking a breath, taking a break, taking a walk around the block, putting that little boy on your lap, and getting recentered in the part of you that we call it remembering love, that can remember, oh, wait, this is not the enemy. I care about this person. Somebody said, wait, why am I talking? Why am I talking to beat them into the ground or prove I'm right or get back at? No, I love them. I want to make things better. Okay, good. Now I can talk. And the first skill is that relational mindfulness before you use, because it's the only part of you that will use any of the other skills. We have a workshop around the world now. And my favorite slide of the workshop is other workshops teach you skills. We deal with the part of you that won't use them. So the first skill is getting into the part of you that really wants to make it better, as opposed to protect yourself, run away, beat the shit out of them, whatever. And the beauty of my work, relational life therapy, is that I believe that capacity to, and this is how Dan puts it, moving from the reactive mind to the responsive mind, the capacity of shifting out of that automatic takeover to thought and choice is a muscle that can be developed. It's a skill that can be cultivated and grown and strengthened. And it's exactly analogous, I believe, and I told you before, I've been meditating for 60 years. It is a spiritual practice. And one of the things I say to my the spiritual friends is, go ahead, be boundaryless and non-dual and abundant on your pillow. You see if you can be boundaryless and spiritual when your partner is screaming at you in the kitchen. Be spiritual in that moment. So I'm bringing, and we recommend that people meditate, by the way. Jack Kornfeld, I'm sure you must know him. Jack and Trudy are going to lead monthly meditation groups for me and the RLT community starting in the fall. Taking time, and this goes back to solitude, taking time and in 12 step, the fourth step is getting in conscious, not the fourth, but being in conscious contact with the divine. But taking time and meditating and quieting and being filled with that energy to whatever degree, that's great prep for the moment in the kitchen when your partner is screaming at you. Your capacity to access that will be greater if you spend time on the cushion than if you don't. On the other hand, I'm a big fan of breaks. And I often say, if you're standing there and open your mouth, who knows? Leave. Contract in advance. I'm going to leave. Here's why. Here's when I'm coming back. That's very important. Everybody agrees. So it's not a rupture. I'm not storming off. I got to get centered. I'll see you in 20 minutes. So in the trauma work, which is big in my field right now, there's a big dramatic, encounters with the wounded and adaptive parts of us in the therapist's office. In RLT, that's great. First of all, we like to do it with your family members next to you. Part of the individualism of my culture, which my field colludes in, so almost all trauma work is done behind closed doors. I like to do it with your partner sitting next to you. They live with you, and it opens their heart. But anyway, the trauma work we do in the office is to set you up to do that practice on your own, day in and day out. And I'm going to shut up in a minute, let you guys talk, but I'll finish with this. I deal with tough guys. I'm a guy. I deal with guys. And I swear to you, and I love saying this, I've got like 6'5", 300-pound NFL linebackers ducking into the bathroom and putting their little boys on their laps when they get reactive. Okay, honey, I gotcha. I understand. I know you want to punch your face out, but I'm not going to let you. You get in the back seat. I got this. And they will do that 6 times a day. But the regulating, the practicing the art of moving from a flooded and reactive to centered and capable, and that's liberation.
Yeah, thank you, Terry.
How was all that to hear?
Yeah, it's great. It's great. So I think that framing of it as an art, and the art of not being a slave to reactivity, and being able to have this choice to decide how you're going to react to that, which is coming up. I think that's a great retelling or reframing of the Four Noble Truths, the causality of suffering, how we cause suffering ourselves by all of this reactivity, and how we can bring about happiness and well-being and non-suffering through practicing the Eightfold Path, or just relational mindfulness as you frame it. And I'm curious, I mentioned this before we started recording, but in Buddhism, the Buddha did say that Kalyanamitta, or spiritual friendship, is the whole of the holy life. So there's this huge place for relational intelligence, relational mindfulness. And he also really did put a premium on training in seclusion, being able to step back and learning how to be with oneself. And I love, you've got a framework that you call the 10 commandments of timeouts, which you mentioned. And I think timeouts are a great principle, which kind of blend these two aspects of relational intelligence with seclusional intelligence, and being able to have the skills of both. And curious if you could just say more, maybe mention some of those commandments of timeouts and just principles, because oftentimes almost just talking things out is fetishized, certainly in modern
Yes.
psychology, certainly in America. It's like, oh, I just have to say my piece. And if I run away, that's, escapism or something. But you really give full allowance for that, and even giving, clear rules around how to do that skillfully. And I just really appreciated that framework and would love to hear more.
Skillful running away. You know, it's so interesting because I say I'm a couples therapist and people assume that I'm an advocate for closeness. Well, I'm fond of saying unadulterated closeness is psychotic fusion. There are movies about that.
We're keeping that one.
Real intimacy is an endless dance and a negotiation of closeness and distance. We and me. My beloved Carol Gilligan, here's a quote. You cannot have voice without relationship, and you cannot have relationship without voice. So the first work we often do with couples is self-esteem work. And the core of RLT is healthy self-esteem, which is, and this is very Buddhist, we're all the same. We have God-given worth. It can't be added, can't be subtracted. You don't earn it, you don't disearn it. It's no better, no worse than anybody else. Relax. And that is what my beloved mentor, Pia Mellody, calls coming out from under the great lie, which Western civilization is based on, which is you are better or worse. You are superior or inferior, or your race is superior, or your country is superior. And, that is a foundation for misery. And there is a peacefulness that comes from the stepping into right self-esteem. I'm neither better nor worse than anybody else. I don't have to, so particularly for men, I don't have to prove my worth. It's not in question. I can relax. We had a wonderful DEI consultant, Duran Young, and I loved her phraseology. She's an African-American woman. And her language for healthy self-esteem was getting right-sized. You're right-sized. You're neither bigger nor smaller than you really are. So, but we work with you and you. And of course, a lot of, look, the poles, when you're balancing intimacy, is closeness and distance. There are many of us who were abandoned, either grossly or subtly as children. We're hungry. We have that wound of abandonment, which is a childhood wound, which leads us to be desperate. Because, again, going back to that trauma, if Covilo, did I get it right? If Covilo pulls away from you, the adult you says, I'm being left. The little boy you I'm making up, who was abandoned, is like, I'm going to die. Abandonment is a childhood state, which is real. It's very real. And, we human beings have the most protracted dependency of any animal. A little 3-year-old's abandoned, they die. And so even if it's emotional abandonment, the childhood feeling of it is desperate. I'm going to die. On the other hand, you have intrusion, being used, a mother's confidant, the immigrant's star child. And when you're used, it's often seen as positive, but it's really not. It's a burden. So if you have intrusion or exploitation, even if it feels benevolent in your background, the wound is about being suffocated, being drained. So if you're over here, you operate behind walls to protect yourself. If you're over here, you're boundaryless and hungry. And of course, you put those two together and you get most American couples. But so we have these wounds, and then we have the adaptation to the wounds, and then we try and be close to each other. And here's Carol again. You can't love from the one up, and you can't love from the one down, love demands democracy. So what you guys, I make up, are doing inside your being, in your meditation, in your monastery, it is the same exact work that I do with a couple. And this is what I mean. Thank you for letting me talk, but here's the paradigm shift. The father of family therapy, Gregory Basin, who was a great anthropologist, married to Margaret Mead, said, he's really the Sigmund Freud of family therapy, and he said he spent his life combating humankind's epistemological mistake, philosophical mistake, which is, according to Basin, this, that we stand apart from nature, that's individualism, and above it and in control of it, that's patriarchy. They're both delusions. And you know this because I begin us with this. All of my work is about helping people correct that delusion and wake up to what I call relationality or ecological wisdom. We're not apart from nature, idiot, we're in it. And once we start, our relationships are our biospheres. We're not under them, above, we're in them. And so I wake people up to the enlightened self-interest of thinking about my biosphere. It's not Covilo wins and Nesabel loses. This is what our biosphere needs to work. And for our biosphere needs to work, I have to speak up. If I'm remember, relationship needs voice, and voice needs relationship. If I'm in the one down, the desperate one, my biosphere need me to lean in and tell the truth and stop being so accommodating. If I'm one up and selfish and entitled, my biosphere needs me to come down and open my heart. But it's not about you. It's about what the context that I depend upon needs. It's enlightened self-interest. And it takes so once we start thinking ecologically, all of the normal, who's right and who's wrong, who cares? Who wins and who loses? You better both win or it won't work. You know, you start thinking of the whole, and you wake up to the wisdom that the whole is in my selfish interest. It's not about giving in to you. It's about taking care of the context. So concretely, I deal with these big burly guys, and they go, well, why should I have to work so hard to please my wife? And I go, knock, knock, you live with her. And it's this shift and then we say there's a map and then there's toolbox, which is also important. Most therapists don't give you real tools. They just tell you to do it better. No, we tell you how to do it better. But the first shift is the map. It's like, wait, it is in my interest to be connected to first myself and then the larger whole that is keeping me alive. And so that's true if I'm talking about a couple or a family or a race or a culture or Mother Earth. We treat Mother Earth with the same patriarchal lunacy and entitlement that we treat. It's a relationship too. So it's the same shift. And I call it waking up. It's the same, we call it mirror process or isomorphic. It has the same form. It's the same movement, whether I'm talking about being ecologically responsible to the planet, being a healer of racial wound and crime versus a perpetrator, being part of the solution versus part of the problem. By the way I handle myself in the world. I'll tell you a story, and then I'm going to let you guys talk. I sat Zen with a Zen master, American Zen master, for 7 years. Once a week, I go plunk money. We talk for 15 minutes about my life, and then we sit together for 45 minutes. And sitting with him was like plugging into a socket. It was drafting. It was, okay, take me. Anyway, but I was writing, I don't want to talk about it, my first book. And he said, I said, I've been so manic, which is true. I've been manic. I haven't slept in 3 days. I believe that I have been able to articulate the fundamental dynamic responsible for male violence and how to stop it. And I'm about to put that out into the world. And I'm so excited. I haven't slept in 3 days. And I said, so tell me, how would you see that from a Zen perspective? It's a true story. And he looked at me and smiled and said, so how you been treating Belinda? Now that's Zen. And the truth is, I've been so high on myself, I was kind of a dick to my wife. Don't leave me alone. I'm doing great thing. I'm saving the world. So I don't even know why I started to talk about this. It's just that we live it. You do what's in front of you, and you live it. And I say to the people I work with, we may not have it in us to bring peace to the Ukraine or, Beirut, but we do have it in us to bring peace to our living rooms and bedrooms. So let's start there.
Terry, I'm first honored to be the conversation where you first come out of the closet as a meditator and somewhat adjacent Buddhist-ish, more
friend of, like friend of Bill, friend of Buddha.
Yeah, it's actually quite touching to know that, and to hear echoes of it through your articulation. Putting aside better than or less than, this releasing of conceit. The movement from me to we, Tara Brach tells this great story. I think you'll like this joke, and maybe it's too long, but whatever. All right. So there's a Taoist meditator who always meditated naked up in this hut, and these Confucian scholars got annoyed and went up to confront him. And they walked into his hut and just said, look, you've got to stop meditating naked in this hut, like put on some pants. And he said, the universe is my hut. This hut is my pants. What are you doing in my pants? In terms of expanding, I'm glad you like that. So in terms of expanding the sense of me, but another echo I hear in what you're talking about is, at the beginning of the cycle of suffering in Buddhism, we have this link between ignorance leading to sankhara, which is like, we translate it as impulse or volitional formation program. And you talk about the quintessential hallmark of the adaptive child as the sense of automatic. You say whoosh, it comes up from the feet, and there it is. And, I think a lot of people can think that they've moved past these, the smile, Terry, that's perfect. These like subcortical impulses, except then you point out in their most intimate relationships that they care about, or like when you really point out where that adaptive child rules, you see it's responsible for so much suffering. And so it can sound very abstract, avijja, sankhara, and granted, it's not a perfect overlay, but when you started talking about the adaptive and wounded child and how one led to the other and gave concrete examples of those pairings, I just found it so moving and relatable. And I just wondered if you'd speak a little bit, finally, to get around to a question, a little about some example pairings of common wounded adaptive children that people might know in themselves or their partners, either stories you know of, or just give people
great. I got right. Good. So, look, for those listening, we can go deeper and deeper into specificity, as we call it, in the 2-day workshop we do, which, by the way, keep an eye out for it. Go to my website. They're all over the country. We talk about shaking hands with your adaptive child, getting to know your adaptive child, losing strategies. We don't have time for this, but there are 5 losing strategies are in my work. This is the strategy to the adaptive child. Proving you're right. How many of us have tried to solve a problem by, well, which of us is, whose feelings are more valid here? Good luck with that. Controlling your partner. I would be happy if only you would, ... Unbridled expression, which therapy has abated. I call it the bark back approach. Let me tell you how miserable I am about you. Aren't we closer? No. Retaliation, I'm going to hurt you the way you hurt me. And withdrawal, I'm out here. Which is different from responsible distance taking. By the way, to go back to what you said, we teach people to take distance. Here's how. I'm taking distance, here's why, here's when I'm coming back. People don't do that. You say, I'm just taking distance. The person, particularly if they have abandonment in their background, which 50% of us, no, you're abandoning me. I'm taking distance. Here's why. Here's when I'm back. And you better come back when you say you're coming back. That's not a rupture. That's a break. Relax. If you want to take distance, take care of the person you're taking distance from. And that's an enlightened principle. If you want something, take care of the person you want it from. It increases the odds of getting it. Anyway, well, where the hell was I? What were we talking about? I had something I wanted to tell you.
No, it's fine. Grounding some examples in the wounded adaptive child.
Oh, yeah. Okay. So, look. So your adaptive child can be one of these losing strategies or some combination. I'm going to fight. I'm going to argue and prove who's right. I'm going to give you every nook and cranny of my feelings. I'm going to hurt you. I'm going to shut this down. And we ask people to do a losing strategy profile for their adaptive child. And of course, your losing strategy profile jives with the other person's losing strategy profile, and then you're off to the okay. To get out, here's a story. So anybody listening, well, what's your losing strategy profile? And then what's your partner's? And then how do they blend to reinforce each other? The more I withdraw, the more my partner fights. The more my partner fights, the more I withdraw. Here's a story. True story. This is my go-to adaptive child story these days. So I deal with couples on the brink that nobody else has been able to help. That's my beat. Tough guys and couples on the brink. About to divorce. Why? He's a chronic liar, which is not tenable. I mean, it's 14 years. Wife says, he's the kind of guy, you tell him those are nice shoes, he'll look down and he'll say, well, they're sneakers. And they're not. I just won't give it to you. And for the therapist who may be listening, he's the kind of guy, I walk in the room and I go, hey, Bill, the sky's blue. And he goes, well, it's kind of gray. He like won't give it to me. So between the report and how he operates, I kind of, I'm thinking, okay, this guy's a champion evader. That's his adaptive child. He's got a black belt in evasion. Then I ask a question, we train relational therapists to think this way. Normal people, wow, that's brilliant. But the adaptive child is on one end of the seesaw. The adaptive child is adapting to someone. It's in a relationship. So so I say to this guy who tried to control you growing up, he got a black belt in evasion. That wasn't that hard. And sure enough, military dad, what he ate, how he sat, his friends, his classes. So how did you deal with this controlling father? He smiled. That's the smile of resistance. That's my ally, that smile. That's life. He says, I lied. Brilliant little boy. Dad said, don't play with Henry. I played with Henry. I came home. I told him I played with John. Smart kid. I say, well, we have the same. Adaptive then, maladaptive now. I always tell my students, always be respectful of the exquisite intelligence of the adaptive child. You did back then just what you needed to do. Good for you. But it ain't back then no more. You're not that 4-year-old. Your wife is not your father. It's a true story. That's all I said. They come back 2 weeks later, hand in hand, all smiles, we're cured. And they were. Of course, I don't tell you the stories where they're not cured, but anyway, they were. Okay, I say, there's a tale. Tell me the tale. Over the weekend, she sent him to the grocery store to get 12 things. True to form, guys being guys, he shows up with 11. Wife says, where's the pumpernickel? He said, my wife Linda calls this relational heroism. He said, every muscle and nerve in my body was screaming to cover my ass and say they were out of the pumpernickel, which they weren't. And in this moment, I took a breath. I thought of you, Terry. We therapists can lend our patients our prefrontal cortex. They're lendable. I thought of you. I looked my wife in the eye and I said, I forgot the goddamn pumpernickel. True story. And she burst into tears. And she said, I've been waiting for this moment for 25 years. That's recovery. That's relational recovery. That's what we're looking for.
Terry, I want to ask a question about accountability. But just touching on that story, you have this very useful framework of second consciousness, which is where you are able to step back. And one of the principles in Buddhism is right speech or harmonious speech, and your allowance, and even creating ground rules for stepping back if one isn't. If the reactivity is just so strong that I'm going to say something that I'm going to regret, that's going to hurt the other person, like, okay, I can step back. So I love that second consciousness framing. Okay, step back. Okay, where do I want to be? Who do I want to be relating from? Who do I want to be relating as? But in terms of accountability, I think one of the interviews I heard you speaking about this was, sometimes, a relationship is framed as being it's 50% my fault and 50% the other person's fault. But sometimes it's 99-1. Sometimes it's 80-20. And I thought that was bold and a useful framing. And, there's this principle in Buddhism, it's called one of the 5 subjects of frequent recollection, that I am the owner of my karma, or I'm the owner of my actions, heir to my actions, born in my actions. Whatever I do for good or for ill, of that I will be the heir. So it's almost this radical, actually it's 100% on me. And also, just to complicate that picture even more, there's, in modern therapy, it's oftentimes going back to parental fault. So parental determinism. Whereas, and you might not get asked this question a lot, but in Buddhism, we've got this whole story, or even framed as a reality, of previous lives. We've got all of this conditionality, both within ourselves, that's causing me to be reactive or non-reactive in the moment, plus choice, but also past relationships with other people, maybe. So that's a bunch, but all about accountability. I'm just curious how you hold all of that and think about the accountability in relationships.
Well, we don't do blame and we don't do victimhood. By and large, yes, we want to be, we are responsible for our lives. And karmically, we're not responsible for the trauma that happens to us as kids. And we're not even responsible for the way we learn to adapt to it. We did the best we could. We're not responsible for the damage that did. From the arbitrary age of 18-ish on, we are 100% responsible for what we choose to do with that damage. And Joe will do absolutely nothing and act it out and pass it on to the next generation. And Bill will do the hard work and end the legacy, transform it. and give his kids a better life than they would have had if he hadn't done the work. Same damage, same trauma. This is free will. The damage belongs to the people who should have been taking care of you who didn't. You didn't ask for that damage. That's your karma. That's what you're born with. That's the hand that you were dealt. Do you want to play that hand, or do you want different cards? That's up to you. That's how it is.
Terry, one very interesting framework I was interested in asking about as well, in terms of this limits of some forms of Western psychology. Like Ajahn Kovilo said, we have, often when you trace the stories back, they do so often lead to parents and conditioning. And I know when improperly framed, that can lead to this sort of epidemic of kids cutting themselves off from their parents a little bit, I feel.
Yeah, it's terrible.
And another interesting, there's a Jung quote that
although sometimes it is necessary. I mean, if your parents are out and out abusive, you have the right to protect yourself. But that's extremely rare.
Okay.
Mostly you want to try and... my family therapist said it about me and my parents, the 16th of a loaf is better than none. So do what we can.
Gratitude. Or that's a good clarification. And one thing I really wanted to ask you, and it is more kind of relevant given, you're speaking about your own spiritual practice, is Jung had a famous quote where he said, I have treated many hundreds of patients. Among those in the second half of life, that is to say, over 35, there has not been one whose problem in the last resort was not that of finding a religious outlook on life. It is safe to say that every one of them fell ill because he had lost that which the living religions of every age have given their followers, and none of them has really been healed who did not regain his religious outlook.
I said that?
No, that's Jung, Carl Jung.
That's Jung. Oh, yeah.
Yeah, Jung. And
yeah.
I find it's a very interesting framing. And I don't know how it plays in, one way
Let me tell you how I see it.
Yeah.
And then, unfortunately, I got to move on. But this has been a wonderful conversation. Here's how I see it. I've been deeply influenced by 12-step. P.M. Melody was my great mentor. And there's a great story about Bill, whoever, the creators of 12-step, going to Jung. And Jung saying the cure for addiction had to be spiritual because the disease was spiritual. And Gregory Basin said that as well, by the way. He talked about the cybernetics of addiction, which what I would call grandiosity. The recursive feedback loop in addiction is, I think I can control it, so I start indulging whatever I'm taking. I get out of control. I realize I can't control it, so I do something for a while. I forget that I can't control it. I think I can control it. I try a little here and there, and when I talk about correcting the epistemological mistake, that mistake is the delusion of dominance, self-will, grandiosity. The Greeks knew about this. Hubris, which is the fall of all Greek heroes. Christians don't know this. At least in the King James Version, God gives Adam dominion over really bad idea. Where was it? Okay, so, and by the way, while I'm preaching, I was a medievalist a million years ago, and I love Meister Eckhart. The essay isn't as good as the title, but the title's perfect. Ready? This is 12th century. Only self-will burns in hell. Is that a great title? Only self-will burns in hell. Mm-hmm. God's will does not burn in hell. Anyway, so how do I see this? What was the question again? I had a good answer for it. Spirituality. Okay, yeah. So listen, here's what I say. Psychologists talk about basic trust. It's supposed to be developed at 2. Good luck with that. And to me, it's a deeper issue because I didn't have basic trust until my meditation in my 60s. And it boils down to a friend of mine, Albert Einstein, late in life. I love this. Journalist said, "What's the most important question in life?" It's Einstein, math. Here's what he says. He said, "The most important question in life is this one: is the universe a friendly place? Can I trust?" And there is a great paradox. I mean, I've talked to Jack Kornfeld about this. There's so much evil in the world, and violence, and horror, and mistreatment, and unfairness. I do like to say, come the day I come face to face with God, she's going to have a lot of goddamn questions to answer. But, and nevertheless, on a good day, if I have a good meditation, I am visited, permeated, and ultimately for a few minutes, sometimes even become an intelligent, loving, benevolent force. And somehow those two things coexist. The extraordinary, cruel suffering, it coexists with the loving, benevolent force. I have no idea how that works. That is beyond my pay grade. But here's the thing. How do I know that ultimately I can relax into something bigger than me that is benevolent? How do I know that? Because I know it, that's how. I don't know how I know it. I know it. I felt it. I feel it. That's basic trust. I like to say, we psychologists talk a lot about letting go, but you don't let go if there isn't something to let go into. You don't jump off the diving board if there's no water in the pool to land in. And I do think that ultimate healing has to be spiritual, no matter what you want to call it, because it means there's a force that, and this, 12-step is beautiful this way. There's a force that's bigger, wiser, more alive than my Cartesian brain. You can say that force is out there. You can say I am that. We'll talk about that another day. But what permeates this life, I can relax into. It will be okay. And that is not a psychological process. That's a spiritual process.
Yeah.
And it's great if you had a loving mother or father who helped you feel that as a kid. It's harder when you have to come to it on your own. Also, when you have tougher childhoods, you're more driven to go deeper and come to it on your own. So who's to say? But actually, I'll leave you with this. May I?
Please.
Yeah, I will. Let's see if I can find you. Bear with me for a few minutes.
Terry, thank you for all that. Thank you.
It's really beautiful to talk to you guys because I feel like I can. I don't know. I feel like I can sort of come out of the closet as a spiritual person. Although I must say, I'm very clear I'm a spiritual practitioner. I love this because there's so much spirituality in RLT. What can I find? I'll talk. I'll paraphrase it. I'm sitting with Jack and Trudy in a retreat in Costa Rica, and we're sitting and we're just goofing around, talking, and we're very close friends. And I say to him, I'm talking about the spiritual underpinnings of RLT, and coming out more and more, owning those spiritual underpinnings and owning my 60 years of spiritual practice. And I say to Trudy and Jack, hey, do you think I should just sort of come out and just name myself as a spiritual teacher? And they went, no! Okay. They said, you're not trained for it. We have enough of it. You do your work. Your work is plenty. Okay. Hold on.
Take your time, Harry. We can edit.
Here I go. Can I read this?
Please.
The legendary psychoanalyst Carl Jung observed that the cure for addiction had to be spiritual because the hole that intoxication was meant to fill was an existential hole. I agree. Psychologists speak about basic trust, the capacity supposedly at 2 or 3, an essentially optimistic belief the universe is friendly and things will work out. But how much basic trust do you have at 3, 4, 8 when someone twice your size periodically lashes out and acts like they hate you? Psychotherapists are keen to say, let go, but let go into what? You won't jump when there's no water to jump into. For those of us from traumatic backgrounds, and in my estimation, that's millions, trust may not be such an easy thing to come by. I'm almost done. In my 3rd decade of regular meditation practice, I often felt expanded, that the boundaries of me and other had relaxed, and I was, as they say, at one with the universe. It was a thrilling, liberating experience. But not until somewhere in my 4th decade of meditation did I begin to feel loved. Basic trust came to me in my 60s. My spiritual practice led me to experience myself as merged with nature that was alive, intelligent, benevolent, and loving. When some, this is my favorite line, when some artists, mystics, exquisite lovers relax their individual selves and allow themselves to be one at nature, it turns out nature looks back. I love that.
That's the perfect counterpoint to Nietzsche's staring into the abyss, is what actually looks back when you stare into nature is benevolent at that level. And Terry, just for coming out of the closet with us, for your wisdom, for what you've given through your work, we're very grateful. So thank you so much for taking the time.
It is truly a joy and lovely to talk to you guys. And I think we're going to be talking again. I would like that.
That'd be great. And so we can stop the recording and you can tell us which one of us is more messed up.
Yeah, I could.